are honored to have the mayors of two of our province's most dynamic and fastest growing cities with us today. Barrie Mayor Jeff Lehman is now in his third term as Barrie's municipal leader, and just this past week was appointed as the Ontario Big City Mayor chairperson for a second time. Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown also started his political career as a Barrie City Councillor. He moved on to become Barrie's federal Member of Parliament for 2 terms and later served as Ontario leader of the Ontario Conservative Party. Patrick re-entered municipal politics in 2018, winning his bid for the mayor of the city of Brampton. Both our guests entered into the political arena early in their 20s for a combined total to date of 35 years of political service to the people. Thank you both for joining us here on Hitting Home today.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
And welcome both to the show, Mayor Brown. I'm going to throw this first one to you. We've got a lot of stuff to cover on this show, and congratulations, obviously, on your successful mayorship in Brampton. It has been an interesting ride this year for certain. Anybody, certainly in their first term or maiden voyage as a mayor, you've had to take on some real challenges. And when we look at the dynamics between the different levels of government, this year has been really the bar. The bar has been set here. And I guess that crucial relationship is what we're interested in. Has senior level of government met the test that COVID has presented economically as well as health-wise? And can you describe that relationship?
Well, I would say there's a better level of collaboration I've ever seen before. Normally there can be partisan finger pointing and a lot of fighting between levels of government. What I've seen is that everyone understands that in a pandemic, it's a very serious, severe challenge for the country, and that everyone needs to rally together. That's not to say that there's not more that can be done. Brampton is in one of the tougher hit spots with COVID-19 because of the high industrial settings and great number of essential workers. But having said that, the federal infrastructure minister, Catherine McKenna, checks in almost every other week. I get regular phone calls from the premier and the prime minister. And so I do believe that everyone is being attentive and working together. And frankly, I wish there was more of this when the pandemic's over.
It's funny you say that. We certainly look south of the border for certain examples after tragedies, and you see a country unite, and I think we've seen that here. But you've been no stranger to being vocal about your belief in your needs in terms of getting testing centers, et cetera. Does the squeaky wheel get the grease?
I do find, and one of the benefits I have, having served in all 3 levels of government, I know how provincial and federal governments work. Federal ministers, party leaders, they get their daily briefings on the headlines. That's how their days start. It's a quick news summary. And so headlines do help dictate the agenda. And so one thing that I try to do when we've had issues in Brampton is drive media attention to those issues. Because I find governments tend to react. And so I try to work collaboratively initially, but sometimes you need to be that squeaky wheel to get the attention. And on a few issues in terms of testing or an isolation center, we've had to do that. And right now, I'm actually having the honor to work with Jeff on something pretty critical, which is paid sick benefits, which we're trying to drive some media attention to right now.
Well, thank you for the segue. Mayor Lehman, over to you on that. You've got a very strong social media following. You've got a good relationship with senior levels of government. And obviously, we just announced this week in Barrie as well the opening of the field hospital. Maybe you can fill us in on what Barrie's been doing in a similar vein.
Yeah, I mean, it is a challenge, and I would echo Patrick's remarks that people are overcoming the challenges of having 3 and often 4 levels of government that are involved in the pandemic response. In Barrie, you've got human services being run by the County of Simcoe, in Patrick's case, the Region of Peel, and then we've got local municipalities, provincial and federal. That's a lot of different pieces, a lot of different responsibilities. The collaboration becomes absolutely essential in that case. But there are situations, especially those issues like paid sick leave that affect people across the country, where it is useful for that public attention to really go along with the efforts between levels of government to try and get some change.
And it is, Mr. Lehman, Mayor Lehman, for lack of a better word, it's a crusade to get people to comply with restrictions and safety protocols. It's never ending. If caseloads continue to climb, should we expect more drastic measures And more importantly, can individual municipalities take it upon themselves to put protection measures in place?
Well, yes to both questions. But I think one of the things that's characterized the solid parts of Canada's COVID response, Ontario's response, is it's been driven by public health. So whether we're talking about Dr. Lowe and the mayor of Brampton working together as they have very well, Dr. Gardner or myself in Barrie, or at the provincial and federal level, what's essential is that public health give us the information and lead the response, because as soon as we start to get away from that, as soon as any other considerations start to enter the picture, we get off base. And I think to this point in COVID, there's been a temptation at times for people to treat it as a trade-off between the economy and fighting the spread of the virus. And the fact is they're the same crisis. The public health crisis is the economic crisis, and vice versa. And for that reason, it's not a case of trading off. It's a case of fighting the virus so that we can support our economy and, more importantly, support our residents in staying safe and ultimately returning to prosperity.
Yeah. So, Mayor Brown, can you add to that? Or
sorry, we can have to break in just a second, Mayor. If you could just keep it to about a minute, please.
Yeah, I can. The one thing I'd add to that is, this is uncharted territory. And so public health governments are learning as this crisis evolves. And so back in March, the collected data on COVID-19 was much more limited than it is today. And so I think today we're seeing, in the midst of the second wave, the ability to be a little bit more surgical than we were in March, when everything was shut down across the board. If you recall, in March, everything from schools to even touching your groceries there was a great deal of concern around. And so one of the benefits of developing knowledge about this virus is that we can be more surgical, we can be more data-driven. And I would echo Mayor Lehman's comments that it needs to be, you need to trust the physicians. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a public health official. This is their expertise, and there needs to be a reliance on their guidance, which I think is happening in Canada. If you look at countries that have squandered this moment and have struggled, it's really when they've followed a political agenda over a public health agenda.
Yeah,
right on. I think you're absolutely right there. I think what we're noticing is, one thing is for certain, is that there's public perception and there's emotion-driven responses and critique, and then there's the science. And the part of science is knowing that new data will lead us to new results or new thought processes, and that's quite possible. That's driving some of the frustration that you're having to echo and or respond to. We do have to go. Sorry, I'm being told, Mayor, we got to go to break, but we'll pick this up and we're going to segue into a discussion around real estate. When we come back from the break, we'll be right back with more on Hitting Home on Rogers TV Barrie.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Avenues such as studio tours or art shows, it's a way for the public to access us. I get my inspiration from the wood itself, because when I started this 30 some odd years ago, there was no reference material for me to get at. I have to read the wood. I have to analyze how it grew. There's a great art scene in Simcoe County. It just needs to be explored. And it's nice to connect with people.
Growing up, I just felt this hatred for myself, and I stopped planning for the future because I didn't think I had one. Without United Way and the generosity of the whole organization, I don't even really know where I'd be.
And welcome back to Hitting Home on Rogers TV Barrie, and we're thrilled to have Barrie Mayor Jeff Lehman and Brampton Mayor Patrick Brown. Thanks both for being on the show with us, gentlemen. We want to get right back into it. Time is tight. we want to talk about housing. We want to talk about people's living environment. And one of the things that both municipalities have had to contend with, all Ontarians or Canadians have had to contend with, is the dire situation in long-term care. And man, I mean, there's no more of a heartstring sort of tugging topic than families not being able to be around their loved ones who are either in independent living or certainly assisted living scenarios. We've got two very different municipalities that we're dealing with, and certainly Brampton being, I would say, or Peel Region being in the hot zone. What is the climate there? And I know, Mayor Brown, you yourself, you have a loved one in long-term care.
Yeah, you know, I think one thing that if Canada was to look back on how they handled the pandemic, a sore spot would be an area of disappointment is how we care for the most fragile residents. And I think in the long-term care settings, we saw a number of fatalities that were avoidable in the spring. You know, my grandmother's in a long-term care residence in Toronto. She's 106, and thank goodness, you know, she was able to get by so far. But in her residence, where there's 140 plus residents, 43 died. And so for when people tell me that, you know, COVID is fictional, I point to the example of my grandmother's residence. It can be incredibly lethal. And in terms of protecting those most vulnerable, I think there's been some lessons learned. There was a high turnover rate of caregivers because you'd have many part-time caregivers working at multiple homes. There was too many visitors into the homes. And so I am worried right now that because it's so fragile, because it's a tinderbox, that as numbers go, it could get in, it could creep into the long-term care settings. And, you know, when I was thinking about this, we had the Canadian Forces come in and help out at a home in Brampton. I was thinking, you know, there was a lady in Barrie who I used to have such high regard for, Doreen Saunders. She used to run one of the IOF homes. And, you know, I wish we could ask her right now how we could better protect the most vulnerable, because she was a brilliant mind within long-term care.
Yeah. Well, our thoughts are with your grandmother and all families who are dealing with and relying on long-term care. I want to talk a little bit about real estate, as we are a real estate related show. Real estate activity in the Barrie area and other outlying areas of the GTA, it's been augmented in 2020 by a number of influences. Affordability of homes in the Simcoe County region by comparison with the GTA pricing is one thing. We've seen a shift of preference for detached homes over multi-units and condo living. We've got low mortgage rate stills, and an increasing number of us have started to embrace the work from home alternative. In combination, these factors are keeping the local real estate very much in demand. One wonders if this is permanent, or is this just a temporary shift in mindset for the home buyer? Or any thoughts on that? I start with you, Mayor Lehman.
Well, it's interesting. I've got a tremendous Realtors Association here who collect a lot of data. They speak to a lot of agents, over 1,000 members. And what BDAR, the Barrie District Association, thinks is there are some long-term shifts here that are probably permanent. And I think the scale of the change is what's really in question. There's no question you're going to see some companies and organizations shift people to working from home or some hybrid model. Is that going to be 5% of the workforce or 25% of the workforce? That's a big question, because obviously that is freeing people up to choose to live outside the Greenbelt, even if their company is headquartered in the Greater Toronto area. Perhaps they'll commute some of the time in that hybrid model, or perhaps they'll just work from home. But there's just no question. People vote with their feet, and they are voting right now to look at locations where single detached housing or ground-related housing is more affordable, but it is rapidly becoming less affordable as a consequence. So I think what you're seeing in the satellite cities is an acceleration of a trend that we were already seeing with the high cost of housing inside the Greenbelt. And really, you know, I don't think this is particularly about fear of COVID itself. It's more about the long-term changes in commuting patterns that are going to result from the pandemic.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're seeing is that you're absolutely right. The pandemic itself may only be the catalyst to what was inevitable anyway, and we're seeing that shift being embraced. Mayor Brown, your thoughts? I mean, Barrie and Simcoe County has been identified by more than one source as sort of that utopian go-to place, the place where the exodus, and I don't know if that exodus is going to be 1%, but certainly 1% of the GTA is a significant number. What are your thoughts, and what are you seeing in Brampton?
Well, so Brampton is facing a unique environment because we have such a population growth. It tends to be the number one destination for new Canadians in the country. And so, we don't have supply that meets the demand. So Brampton is going to continue to be one of the fastest growing big cities in Canada. And when you have demand and limited supply, it drives prices up. There's one thing that I would add in terms of the context, though. Right now, you're seeing that spiraling of prices. But if interest rates go up, and some are predicting they will, that will put a damper on this escalation of housing prices. From a Simcoe County perspective, I don't think it's a secret. I still am a property owner in Simcoe County in Oro-Medonte, where I've maintained a cottage, and I've been surprised by the prices there. There's been a real wave of interest to buy property out of the city, and partly because people who are confined to office towers in Toronto are now able to do meetings on WebEx and Zoom from the comfort of their cottage or a home outside the city. And so I think places like Niagara, Simcoe County are going to increasingly be they're going to drive a lot of interest.
Yeah, yes. I would agree with you. One of our challenges that I'm seeing here locally is you're absolutely right. The interest rates are historically or near historic lows. However, if you're selling a home that is north of $1 million in the GTA and moving to where the average price is below 600, even if the house prices continue to increase or interest rates increase, you're still going to see that a shift in demographics in terms of who's going to be affording properties where.
The differential will always be there, even as prices go up in Toronto, they'll go up here, but there'll always be that gap that tempts people to come here. I'm curious, will this shift that we're seeing, like a revised vision on residential planning, is something that I wonder if bigger cities will be looking at in the next 10 to 20 years. We've had in Barrie, our places to grow. Well, that's Ontario-wide. And then there's our official plan, which came forward recently, or it's being looked at right now. Are there things happening now that changing home preferences that we're seeing that are going to require the cities to go back to the drawing board and maybe take a different look at how we plan for the future here with residential growth?
So mayors, I'm going to let you pull out your notepads, and I'm going to let you write some notes and do your homework while we go to break real quick, and we'll answer that on the other side. Stay with us and Hitting Home on Rogers TV Barrie.
Hey, did you know?
More than 4,500 Canadians are waiting for an organ transplant right now.
Right now. 4,500.
People are dying.
And you could save a life. 90% of Canadians say they're willing to donate their organs.
But only a few are registered.
So what are you waiting for? Get registered.
It's easy and it's free.
Leave a legacy. Be a hero.
Save a life.
Find out how to register today. Go to kidney.ca.
I'm up here at the North Pole getting ready for the big day. But you can talk to me right here on Rogers TV every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in December at 6 p.m. Hope to see you there. Ho, ho, ho.
Welcome back to Hitting Home on Rogers TV. Barrie, Mayor Lehman, you were about to answer a question regarding where do you see planning going over the next few years?
So this is a huge challenge that my profession is going to have to confront. I'm an urban planner by background, and for years there has been a focus on intensification, and rightly so. It is a more sustainable form of development, allows people to walk to things, it allows the support of transit and other good things. A lot of the assumptions behind that are, of course, going to be challenged by a population that are seeking single detached housing, more space, more green space in their community. You've seen this very powerful debate going on in Toronto right now around how do you ensure there's enough public and green space for people who are living in very high density neighborhoods. And I think some of the assumptions that our planning profession has had are going to be challenged here. The realities, though, don't change, which is that single detached housing is not affordable for the vast majority of the population, at least anywhere between Barrie and Bay Street. And I would suspect for many in Brampton and elsewhere in the GTA, I think the answer is going to lie in what planners call the missing middle, medium density. With that sort of townhouse up to a 4, 5, 6-story apartment, where there is still the ability to do site planning, subdivision planning, neighborhood planning, with green space, with the opportunity for people to have a relationship with the community around them and not to be necessarily in 50-story towers. There's still going to be a role for that, but how much the unit mix shifts and how our planning looks at especially the provision of public and collective space post-pandemic, that's going to be a big, big issue.
Yes.
You've got more density, I would argue, in Peel Region and Brampton. And how do you see this rolling out in your planning discussions?
Yeah, I agree with much of what Jeff has already articulated. I would add additionally that when there's a supply shortage, you're going to continue to see an incredible demand. And in the GTA, there's only so much land left. And so where in Simcoe County, there may be more opportunities for new growth. I know in Brampton, it's just in the northwest that you've got some of the remaining spots of vacant land. And so how you paint that canvas, you're running out of runway. I would note you can add to the provincial environment right now. They're using tools that haven't been used before. There's MZOs, right. And so there is a new pressure on expediting development through the use of MZOs, which for those that don't follow provincial politics, it's literally a nuclear tool the minister has to be able to expedite a development that sometimes could take 5 years and make it happen almost overnight. And then on top of that, we have the challenge that everyone tends to forget about when we talk about planning, and that's affordable housing. And I can tell you in Brampton and Peel Region, we have a 7-year wait list for affordable housing. And so how do you force that to be part of urban planning when it tends to be the easiest part that is forgotten? And so we're looking right now in Brampton at creative ways to create new affordable housing. And we've got a secret tool we're using. And for some of your fans in Simcoe County that watch this show, we've actually taken from Barrie, Richard Ford. He's the new director, the new commissioner of planning in the city of Brampton. He's a former staff member, a senior staff member of the city of Barrie, and he has been brilliant at helping us look for opportunities to not only develop transit-oriented communities like Jeff has articulated, but also incorporating affordable housing where we can.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to take us out with a general question about municipal governing. In Barrie, we have 10 wards and 10 part-time councillors who each represent one ward. Brampton also has 10 wards, though they have 5 full-time councillors, each representing 2 of their 10 wards. Brampton also has a population 4 times greater than Barrie. Is it a fair question to ask each of you if one model of municipal governing is better than the other?
And you both got to
sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, fair question. I've said frequently in the last little while that Barrie is approaching that spot where really a councillor's work is going to be full-time. And I think there's an interesting question around, are you better with a smaller council of full-time members or a larger council of part-time members? I can in some ways argue both sides of this, because I think one of the strengths in municipal government is it's pragmatic, it's not partisan. Patrick referenced that before. And when you have people who come from different walks of life who continue to work in different industries, they bring that experience, that real life experience to the council table. And I've watched that over the years help us create better policy and create a better connection between the administration of the city and people's everyday lives. I would say if there's a learning of the last little while, it's that the demands of the job are increasing. People want answers faster. The issues are much more complex, affordable housing just being one of them, and the expectations of our residents to be able to address those complex issues. So if it's not full-time counselors, there should be more resources for decision makers and in support of the decision makers around the council table, because the old model of show up for a few hours on a Monday night and try and guide a municipality, that is not the reality of a councillor's job anymore, and it probably shouldn't be.
Yeah. And Mayor Brown, you've had the pleasure of working in both environments. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I would say the tools that MPPs and MPs have are much greater than what a councillor would have. I would say that, having served as a councillor in Barrie, I'm not sure that Mayor Lehman or the councillors, for that matter, have the tools that other levels of government have in terms of constituency engagement, in terms of being able to respond to all the inquiries. In Brampton, it is a full-time position. The city council, they get support staff as well. Having said that, we have some wards in Brampton that would be bigger than the city of Barrie. The West End wards are 150,000. The East End ones are 150,000. And so it is a huge volume of constituency work that comes in. So I don't know what that spot is. Is it when a city hits 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 that it becomes full-time? And that's always a difficult decision for a city to wrestle with. But I'm sure my friends in Barrie will make that decision in the right fashion when it's appropriate.
Well, Mayor Brown and Mayor Lehman, I want to thank you both. Mike, I'm sure you agree with me. I'm not sure if this is a world's first, but we definitely have some amicable relations here on our show. We've got two mayors from two fantastic cities in Canada. Obviously, there's a little friendly competition, as there should be, between municipalities. Thank you both for bringing your best game and for the service and the work that you're doing. And you are doing a fine job. You both got very good response from your residents, your constituents. We thank you for your time on our show, and we hope to have you both back at a future date.
Thank you so much,
guys.
We'll see you again on Hitting Home with Mike and Arif.